Right, so we're just going to kind of walk through on how to actually put lockout tagout in place. So we're just kind of creating a situation here. We're going to pretend we're changing the pressure switch down here. So in order to do that, there is a little bit of electrical work here. So that is our hazard. We just kind of identified it is the electrical. Right now we do have voltage going into this pressure switch. In order to work on that, we're going to need to isolate that, make sure there's no power going to it. So the first step in a lockout tagout is to determine the work area, which is pretty obvious here. We're going to be working right here. We're going to identify what the scope of work is. We're changing our pressure switch, a little bit of rewiring. We're identifying the hazards. So our hazard is an electrical hazard feeding this. And we're going to determine what we need to do to make it safe. Basically, that would be just to simply isolate, make sure we have no power coming here, and it would be safe to work on it. So in this case, I mean, we do have a switch right there, but just for the sake of it, we're going to isolate it right at the breaker panel. So we'll go take a look at the breaker panel and see what we need to do over there. So we are over at the breaker panels, and we want to determine, basically, we need to get a plan together on how we're actually going to lock this out. So we're going to look through the breaker panel to see where the switch is for there. If it's not labeled, you might have to do trial and error, basically until you find the breaker that shuts power off to that. So I don't see well pump over here. I know in this case, the well pump is on the generator panel, because if the generator kicks on, it would be powered by the generator still. As we went over in the other video, kind of explained a little bit how this works. Right now it's not actually being fed by the generator, it's still being fed by city hydro. But we see down here, we have a breaker for well pump. So if we flip this off, we could then go and test to make sure it's off. So before we actually go to flip this breaker off, what we have to do is notify anyone affected by whatever energy we're shutting off. Because we're shutting the well pump off, if this was a customer's house, we'd be telling them, hey, just so you know, we're going to be shutting the pump off. You want water, it's a commercial building, multiple trades, multiple people. Let everyone know, basically, so everyone's on the same page. They're not all of a sudden wondering, hey, what happened to the water? Just make sure everyone's notified of the work you're doing and why it is being shut off. Confirm with everyone basically involved that it will be shut off, the reason why. The other thing before we actually go to turn it off is we want to confirm basically how we're going to be locking this out. So we know it's a breaker we have to flip, but how can we lock it to ensure that no one else will be turning it back on? So in this case, because we have a nice generator panel here, we will be using the bar style to lock out this whole panel so no one can get into it and flip our breaker back on. Before we actually test to make sure it's off, always test your tester first. Make sure your tester is actually giving a proper reading. So before we flip this off, I'm just going to go back over to the pressure switch, and we're actually going to test to make sure our tester is working first. Right. So first tester I'm going to use, I just have a Penn voltage tester, voltage detector. So this isn't an actual multimeter. All it's telling me basically is if there's voltage. It won't tell me how much or anything, but it's an easy way to check. We'll turn it on. Basically, we're going to go up to the contacts while the power is still on. Hold it close. If it beeps like that, that means we have power. So we know that this tester is working. We're also going to test our multimeter here. All right, so with our multimeter, we first touch the prongs together to make sure the multimeter does seem to be working. Might be hard to get that on video. It's telling us we have continuity, that's good. Check from ground, and we're getting 120 volts. Confirming this is working, we do have power. Right, now that we know our testers are working, we can go ahead and flip the breaker, which should then isolate the pressure switch on the other side. We'll go test now to make sure we have no voltage. Right, with the breaker off, let's make sure we don't have any voltage. Nothing here. And just for good measure, we'll double check with our multimeter. And nothing. So we confirmed power is off to this. So, I mean, there's no power. Technically, we could work on this now, but the reason why we're locking out, if there's, you know, someone else went and flipped that breaker back on, if we were working on this, Obviously that would not be good. We could get electrocuted. So that's why we want to lock out, basically confirm no one re-energizes the power while we're actually working on here. You know, if there's another trade working, the water's off, they don't know that we're here working. They just go check the breaker, see it's off, they might turn it on. Situation here, we're going to be using a cable style lockout. So just kind of a brief overview on how to install that. Right, so we're going to take this. I have two locking ends, but basically they just secure into the panel. And this end's kind of just like a rope grab, so you kind of have to pop that cable out in order to adjust it. You want to pull it tight. Once it's pulled tight, you just need to push that cable in between those two locking wheels. So once it's pushed in there, you can see, hopefully better here, how it is actually locked in. You can see it works just like a rope grab from your working at height stuff. So you want to pull, make sure it's tight. You want to add more slack, and you just pull this out from the rope grab, and we can now pull tighter on it, and push it back into place. It is now nice and secure. We won't be able to open this panel, not quite done yet. Shut this on it, and we're going to add our lock. That's going to keep it all locked in there. So every truck is going to have their own lock for each person, your own key. Simply, all we do is shut this box, we put our lock on it. Before we actually lock it, we also want to have a tag. You always got to fill these tags out to do it properly. On the tag, it should include your company, your name, your contact information, the date, where you're working, basically what the work is. So we might have the breaker isolated here, but this isn't actually where we're working, so people can come and find us there. The expected completion date. We can basically just lock this all together. So we're fully locked out now. No one can access this breaker unless they have the key, our numbers on it in case anyone does need to contact us. If there was multiple different people or trades needing to have this locked out, we can add multiple keys. Before we actually begin the work, we just want to verify again that we still have no power. So you check with your multimeter or your voltage tester, whatever, basically just verify. So everything's locked out, there's still no power, and we're good to do our work. So we're going to change the switch. All right, so just like that, we're done changing the switch. New switch is in, everything's good to go. We're ready to turn the power back on, do our testing with the switch, and get water back onto the building. First thing we're going to have to do is notify all of the affected personnel. So just like we notified them that it was going to be off, we're going to let them know, hey, we're ready to turn it back on. We're going to make sure that no one else is doing work on the same thing, that we're good to re-energize the source. Everyone that could potentially be affected by it needs to know that it's coming back on. Once everyone has confirmed that, we are good to restore the energy. So we'll go back over it. So everyone has been notified. Everyone is aware the power's coming back on. There was no conflicting work being done, so we're good to open it back up. So again, we're going to take our key, and we can basically just disconnect everything. So again, to remove our lock, we're just simply pulling the cable back out. It is now able to slide. And so we can completely remove the lock and put it back into our storage place for it. And we're good to restore power. So we have the power back on. We're going to do our testing on our actual pressure switch, make sure everything's working, which in this case it is. So we're going to notify the customer that we're completed, everything's done, everything's back on, everything's up and running, and everything's good to go. We're going to finish the form on Service Titan, complete that. Right, so under the form section here, this is how we're going to access the form for the lockout tagout. So we're going to go to add form. And here you'll see there's a form for lockout tagout recording, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to go through, fill out all the required information. The reason why we have to do this is just the Ontario Health and Safety Act requires that lockout tagout is recorded, and for any future reference, anything like that we might need. So yeah, just as simple as filling this form out, signing it, and hitting save.